To our amazing listeners of SheMD, we record SheMD here in Los Angeles, and like thousands of others, we've been displaced by the fires that have devastated neighborhoods across the west and east sides of the city. I raise my boys in the Pacific Palisades, and my heart is heavy for everyone affected by these unimaginable fires. It's a tragedy beyond words, and we want you to know our hearts are with each and every person touched by this event. Even in the midst of this, we know that Los Angeles is strong, and we know that we as a community can come together to help each and every one affected by these fires. We're going to continue to share episodes of SheMD with important conversations about health, wellness, and hope, which especially feels vital right now. If you've had to evacuate or lost your homes, hold on to hope. Wherever you are, please remember to take care of yourself, your family, and your community. We'll be sharing ways to help the victims of this tragedy on our socials all week. And now, here's this week's pre-recorded episode of SheMD. Sending you so much love, Mary Alice and Dr. A.
Hi, I'm Dr. Aliabadi. If you struggle with irregular cycles, acne, facial hair, body hair, hair loss, or insulin resistance, you might be dealing with PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. Having dedicated my life to helping women with PCOS, I understand the challenges in getting an accurate diagnosis and the right care. That's why I created OV. OV is designed to help you take control of your health with clinically proven, validated ingredients in a simple, once-a-day solution. For too long, women with PCOS have had to choose between lifelong prescriptions or complicated supplement regimens. OV offers a better way to help manage your symptoms without the hassle. It's my mission to empower women facing PCOS and other hormonal issues by providing the information and support they need. Reclaim your health once and for all. Go to OV.com. That's OVII.com and start today.
So today we're so excited to have Cara Natterson on the show. And when I was having my babies, everybody in Los Angeles wanted you to be their pediatrician. When you quit your practice to go start this amazing next chapter of your career, which is making puberty really normalized and teaching moms and dads how to talk to your children about puberty, teaching children how to look at their own bodies and understand everything from puberty to sex to just normalizing this kind of awkward, uncomfortable stage that children are in, that I remember being in very distinctly. I mean, middle school was, there's a reason that they make movies about it. You've written 10 books, and before we started shooting, I didn't even know this, that the first one was called, it was about your baby head to toe?
Yep, your newborn head to toe.
Your newborn head to toe.
I never told anyone about it.
So can you just tell us how this whole second phase, now it's, a huge success started?
I mean, I was in practice in Santa Monica. I had 7 partners. One of them was Harvey Karp, who wrote The Happiest Baby on the Block. Yeah. I was 30 years old when I read Harvey's manuscript, and I literally thought, oh, if Harvey can write a book, I can write a book. And that is how I became a writer. Literally, I had no business. I had no training. There was information that parents wanted to know, and so I put it in a book. Now, my business acumen was not great at the time because I never told any parents that I had written a book. So I did it. I did it on my maternity leave. This will speak to you and efficiency in medicine. I did it on my maternity leave. Then I had a second baby and I wrote a second book on a second maternity leave. And it was when I finally decided to leave practice, I was like, okay, I'll give this writing thing a shot. And that's how it all started.
How long did it take you to write it?
I am a fast writer, it turns out.
I was going to say, how long was your maternity? Mine was 2 weeks.
I'm a fast writer. I wrote each of the books in the 3 months of that second trimester push is amazing, right? You have so much energy. So I wrote them largely in my second trimester. These were questions and answers that people had been asking me for years. And then I edited them when I was on maternity leave. So,
Amazing.
Yeah, it
And
was fun.
when I was doing my research about this, and I think I probably did this all wrong because I definitely didn't sit my children down to talk about puberty.
Okay, so I'm going to reel back a little bit and start by saying no one does it wrong. But so we all have to give ourselves more grace and recognize the tools that are available now are better. Times have changed. We're in conversation about this. You guys are talking about PCOS all the time. We're talking about menopause all the time. We're talking about puberty today. These are things that were never discussed 10 years ago. So hooray for that. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in that. Okay. Puberty is starting earlier than ever before.
I have a question. It's the heart and soul of everything I do, and I sometimes clash with pediatricians when it comes to painful periods and when it comes to PCOS and teenagers with eating disorders. Yeah. One criticism that I have always of pediatricians, one is that they ignore painful periods. Yeah. I saw a picture of a little girl, a 16-year-old, curled up on the floor. And her aunt showed me the picture and says, this is how my niece looks like when she has her period. She has endometriosis, so I know her niece is 4 times more likely to have it. These patients never get diagnosed by pediatricians. And the second one is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Yes, teenagers do get acne, but some of them also have high testosterone and they have insulin resistance and they gain weight and they end up going down the path of an eating disorder. I'm working on the gynecologist, but tell me, why is it that these little girls get dismissed by their pediatricians?
I think it's because there's a lack of education. I think pediatricians, first of all, it's not what we learned in medical school. It's that we were all socialized to just buck up and deal with a period. And I think there's new recognition that, oh, not everyone is curled up in a ball when they get their period. And oh my gosh, maybe they have endometriosis. So I think some of this is generational shift that you're starting to see, but it's also under awareness. The PCOS piece, they do teach a lot in pediatric residency about PCOS, but they've taught about it in an antiquated way, right? So it's the diagnosis of PCOS is supposed to look a certain classic way, and you and I both know it doesn't look like that at all in most people. And so when it does, pediatricians are really good at picking it up. But when it looks anything other than what it's supposed to look like, they just don't recognize it. And some of it's a bandwidth issue. So there are fewer and fewer pediatricians every year. This year, 288 pediatric general residency spots went unfilled in the match. We are not going to have enough pediatricians. Wow. This is a very big deal.
Because they're not getting paid.
Because they're not getting paid. Because they graduate from medical school with the same debt as everyone else. And we are family practice doctors and pediatricians are the lowest reimbursed. We are not valued. We are not valued by anyone. And so we rely upon a very small pot to draw from. But periods are slightly different story. And I think we need to talk about them in separate conversations. So let's just do puberty for a sec. Puberty means the path to sexual maturation. You go from not being able to be part of a baby-making equation to being able to be part of that equation in whatever way, shape, or form. You need sex hormones to do that, and you need your reproductive organs to mature. That whole path is puberty. 2 generations ago, puberty began on average, but around 11 for girls and 11.5 for boys. And that data dates back to the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. A guy named James Tanner in England, he documented it all. That's what we saw in medical school. That's what we saw in residency. Then things started changing. So now the average girl enters puberty between 8 and 9. There are still lots that enter later, and there's still lots that enter actually earlier. And for boys, it's between 9 and 10. And we can talk about what it means to enter puberty because lots of parents don't even recognize it. It's not getting a period. Periods are a middle marker of female puberty.
And I think that's where people get it confused, right? They always talk about puberty and they think puberty means you get your period. It's not. So let's start with puberty.
Yes.
Tell us.
Okay.
What are the signs that you know that your child's going through puberty?
I'm going to quote my favorite pediatric endocrinologist. Her name is Louise Greenspan, author of a wonderful book called The New Puberty, which came out 10 years ago, but it's still perfectly relatable and timely. The first sign of puberty is a slamming door.
Have you read Untangled?
It's the best. Lisa
It's
D'Amour
Lisa
is so
D'Amour is
wonderful.
so good.
She's so wonderful. The first sign of puberty is usually a slamming door. And by the way, let's not gender this here, okay?
Yeah.
Everyone slams or quietly closes doors as they go through puberty. So what's happening? In your brain, you release LH and FSH. Doesn't matter your gender, boys, girls, everyone, as they enter puberty, their brains release LH and FSH. Those two hormones go down to the ovaries or the testicles, whatever you've got in your body. If they go to ovaries, ovaries make estrogen and progesterone. If they go to testicles, testicles make testosterone. Then those hormones start to surge. The signal to the brain, we're good here. We can turn off the signaling. LH and FSH go off. Then production of either estrogen and progesterone or testosterone turn off. Then there's a signal, wait, we need more. And this is the seesawing, the peaks and valleys that we see in sex hormones surging as kids are entering puberty. So the very first manifestation is what we see when kids' brains are saturated with these high levels and then depleted with very low levels of sex hormones. They don't understand why they feel how they feel. And all of them feel these waves. Eventually, girls will bud breasts. That's usually the first sign of female puberty. And boys, it's testicular and penile growth. But you can imagine for anyone who has had a young boy grow up in their home, they know around this age, boys get really private. So most parents, and I will put myself in this category, have no idea when their sons are entering puberty if they are relying upon seeing testicular growth. And you shouldn't examine your kids. I did not examine my kid. So
Because I was reading somewhere you said, especially with boys, if they start to go into their room and they're quiet, don't let them stay and try to bring them back into the family.
So I wrote a whole book about it called Decoding Boys, and it really came out of my personal experience with my very sweet, incredibly monosyllabic son, who, by the way, has come out the other end of puberty, and he actually talks, and we have great conversations. But boys in general, there's no data on this. I can't wait for this study. Testosterone must quiet them. It must. We know it causes rage, but the other side of that pendulum swing, I believe, is the quiet that we see. And even talkative boys who stay talkative get quieter. That's what parents report. So when they get really quiet, we assume it means they don't want to talk to us. In fact, when they were growing up, when our generation of, husbands or our fathers were growing up, they all thought, oh, this is just what you do. And their parents just left them be. But the thing is, these boys still want to be in conversation. They still have questions. They still have worries. They still have joys. So if we just let them shut the door and shut us out, we are not showing up for them in the same way that we're showing up for our daughters, who tend, but not all of them, to wear their emotions on their sleeve. And so that's why I say, if they shut the door, what I used to do with my son is I would sit outside the door and I'd be like, hey, buddy, I'm here on the other side of the door.
It's so true.
Right? Because you just have to show up for your kid. That's how they know they can be in conversation. But it's slow and it's hard.
Lisa D'Amour actually tells you, and I didn't know this until I read her book, because as parents, when your children go in the room and lock the door, you always wonder, well, why is she locking the door?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
What is she doing? And what this book tells you as the first strand of development, this book is written for girls, but I'm sure it's the same for boys, that they do close the door because they want privacy. So ignorant parents, I would have been one, thank God I read this book, knock on the door and start yelling at their children saying, what are you doing back there? You need to open this door. I'm going to break this lock. You can't lock this. This is my house, blah, 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 blah. They go in and 99.9% of the time, they're not doing anything.
That's right.
They just
Closing
want their
the
own
door.
time.
They just want their own time and privacy. So this was an aha moment when I read this book, because growing up, we were not allowed to lock our rooms.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you one other amazing Lisa D'Amour lesson. She just wrote a book called The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, which is excellent. And she came onto my podcast and she said, you know, when they come into your room at night and they want to have a conversation and you're already in bed because now they're teenagers and they're not going to bed until after you, and they come in and they want to have a conversation. She said, what do you do when the conversation is over? And I said, oh, Lisa, I'm usually not done. So I get up and I follow them out of the room. And she goes, no. They are calling the board meeting. They are asking you to meet them on their terms. Isn't this incredible? They are coming into your room where you are laying down in the dark and they are telling you, I'm going to meet with you on my terms. And then when I turn around and leave, the meeting is over. And it's the best piece of advice that I messed up so many times, but my son was really glad.
He's 16. I'm like, can we still snuggle?
I know, right? Exactly.
This happened. It's funny you say this. 2 nights ago, I was, I'm exhausted always. So it's midnight. I'm in my bed. I brush my teeth. I put all my creams on. I'm like half asleep. And my second daughter comes in with my third one. And she starts blasting Taylor Swift. And she's like, Mom, come on, let's go Greek. I don't know, it was 11 o'clock. I'm like, no, it's so late. I'm so tired. She's like, she starts playing a Taylor Swift song that says, when I go to college, you're going to miss me. And she started telling me, Mom, I'm going to videotape this moment because when I go to college, you are going to regret not coming to go Greek with me. And at that moment, I had such guilt. And honestly, like what you said, my problem is I can't get out of bed. I wanted to stay in bed. I stayed in bed and I hugged and kissed her. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm going to take you another day. But when she left, I had this guilt in my heart, even though it was 11 o'clock at night and I was exhausted. But a part of my heart said, it's rare for them to come and say, let's go somewhere. I should have done it.
On the other hand, from enough parenting experience that they're very, very smart, those young humans of ours.
Yes.
And they're very good at extracting what they want and need. And so when you have the judgment or the exhaustion to be able to set a limit and say no, great.
Really?
Yes.
Good.
Great.
Yeah. And you said something before I wanted to touch on. You said we know that testosterone equals rage. Yeah. How, with a boy, how can you know what's developmentally appropriate and what's a problem?
This is really important. In fact, it's important regardless of gender because there is so much Venn diagram overlap between what we call a mental health issue, and we're terrified for our tweens and teens. This is a very real epidemic that we're seeing. But where do mental health issues end and hormonal swings begin? And this gets very complicated. So the short answer is, the kids in your lives best. So if this means your children, students in your classroom, patients in the office, there are lots of different forms of trusted adult, and those trusted adults know those kids best. And if something in your trusted adult core is saying, by the books, this seems okay, but I'm worried, you pick up the phone and you call either a pediatrician, a family practice doctor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, someone who is trained to help you assess. Because it's really hard to tell. Here's the other thing. Testosterone equals rage comes from a bunch of studies that show that everything from that the physical sort of outbursts that you see among men are probably driven in part by testosterone, to treating women with testosterone increases their energy level and their strength, to looking at prison populations and violent criminals and looking at their testosterone levels. Like there are all these different types of studies that look at the impact of testosterone. This does not mean that rage is not valid sometimes, that it's not an appropriate expression sometimes. So kids are learning. They're learning to manage their emotions, and we can't overlook the emotion. Likewise, we can't always pathologize it and say this is not an appropriate feeling. Sometimes something is enraging. They're really upset. They just have to learn how to manage the emotion.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. I want to go back to puberty.
Yeah.
I want you to go down the path of a puberty of a young girl.
Great.
and of a young boy separately.
Got it.
So for parents with daughters and with sons. Let's start with girls because I have 4 daughters, and then we can get to boys. Tell us about puberty and what is normal expectation of a girl going through puberty.
And how to talk to both about it.
Girl puberty begins when estrogen and progesterone start to rise. We see mood swings, which most often are over expressions of emotion. So laughing hysterically when something's not that funny, crying when it's not that sad, right? An over response. We see breast budding. Breast budding is when underneath the nipples, I always describe it as a stack of 3 to 4 dimes. Everyone laughs because kids don't even know what change looks like anymore, but that's my description. The nipples get puffy, right? Then the breast tissue starts to grow. Sometimes, by the way, breast buds appear and disappear. Most of the time, they appear only on one side. So the number of pediatric visits for a breast cancer scare, I can't even count how many I've had.
I see them too.
Yes, right? They're terrified.
Yeah.
And 50% of all boys will get breast budding. So this is all really important to know. This is really one of the first signs. Over time, then, the shifts in girls are really ones of growth, height gain, weight gain, curves, voice drops, which can happen partially because of estrogen, but also because everyone has every hormone in their body. So we make estrogen in our ovaries, but we also make testosterone in our bodies. Testosterone and derivatives of testosterone come from the adrenal glands. They get converted in the peripheral fat. So the testosterone that's circulating around girls' bodies drops their voices. And then over time, we start to go to sort of, you see a female pattern of menarche, first period. Some are regular from day one. They get a regular period, and every 3 to 5 weeks they have a period. Some are not regular for years. And then they do their growth spurt. Their growth spurt usually starts before their first period, not always. And they don't stop growing until 2 years after a regular period. So that's girl puberty. You may have noticed I didn't mention hair. I didn't mention pimples, and I didn't mention body odor, because those are not puberty. Those are called adrenarche, and they show up around the same time, but they're totally controlled by the adrenal hormones coming off the top of the kidneys, the adrenal glands. And so some kids get pubic hair when they're 5, and they're not anywhere near puberty. They just have hair. Or some kids will break out with pimples all over their face when they're 7 or 8, and they're not in puberty. And some kids will get a period and never have any pubic hair, and then suddenly the pubic hair comes in later. So the timing of adrenarche can be totally separate from the timing of puberty. But usually it goes in lockstep. The last thing I'll say about girl puberty is that the onset average is between 8 and 9. Now, the data we have looks at 3 races. All the studies use different terminology. So Black or African American kids are first to puberty. Hispanic or Latina kids are next. And then white kids, Caucasian kids are last. That leaves out a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. There is not enough data on most kids in this country. And Louise Greenspan, the new puberty, has gone on to study all of the reasons why. She's part of a very large group of scientists looking at this. And it looks like it is really not racial. It looks like it is zip code. It looks like this is an issue of stress. We can talk about why stress makes puberty start earlier, but it is probably stress-related, poor nutrition, poor resources, poor sleep as a result of having limited resources, poor medical care. So I think we want to put racial labels on phenomena that are sometimes socially induced. And I think in 10 more years, we're going to be able to say unequivocally, yes, the less you have, the earlier you are to puberty, which is just, it's preventable, right? This is solvable. Yeah. So that's girl puberty.
Is it a problem that you're starting puberty earlier? Are there medical problems that arise from that?
Here's the amazing thing about the timeline of puberty. We have moved up the starting point by 2 to 3 years. But menarche, first period, has gone from 12 3/4 to, until about 6 months ago, 12 1/2. It moved up by 3 months.
Okay.
So 3-month time spurt on the period side and a 3-year jump on the physical development. What does that mean to you? It means you have 4 kids, that the younger kids are going through puberty in a much slower way. It's like taffy, right? It's just taking longer, which is so fun.
Yeah.
Everyone involved. And I say 6 months because there's new data out showing that actually the new average age to start your first period is 11.9. This is brand new data. That's a pretty big escalation. Yeah. That's another 6 months of escalation. It's still 9 months of escalation versus 3 years. So,
and it affects your height, right?
Yes. So the earlier a girl gets her period regularly, the sooner she'll stop growing. Because remember, she grows until she's had a regular period, 2 years. Growth spurts for girls, 2 to 3 inches a year for 2 to 3 years. For boys, it's 2 to 4 inches a year for 3 to 4 years. That's where boys gain on girls. But so if you start your period earlier, you get regular earlier, then your growth spurts can end earlier. Mm-hmm. And it all has to do with estrogen telling the growth plates in the bone to fuse.
Yeah. So tell us about boys.
Okay. So boys, they enter between 9 and 10. I cannot tell you the number of parents I speak around the country who come up to me and they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. My son's not in puberty. And it's like, well, I can't tell you that. And you can't tell you that because you're not going to examine his penis and his testicles, but go to the pediatrician and let me know. And I get these emails. Oh my gosh, my kid's in puberty. So,
and what do the penis and the testicles look like?
They grow.
They just get bigger.
They grow. There's this necklace called the orchidometer that shows different testicular sizes, and it starts with prepubescent and it goes all the way up to the end of puberty. And testicles are measured by volume. So a prepubescent testicle is 3 to 5 milliliters, and a post-pubescent testicle is 15 to 25 milliliters. And they're noticeably different in size. And there's absolutely no reason a parent would notice that their kid has gone from a 3 milliliter testicle to a 6 milliliter testicle. Mm-hmm. But testicles are where the testosterone is made. They're the factory. And they got to grow. And they got to start to churn out more and more of this hormone. So the first couple of years, it takes a long time, slow, methodical testicular and penile growth. Then you start to see more lean muscle mass, right? They start losing that baby fat and they start trading it off for lean muscle mass. Their shoulders broaden. The way their bones grow looks different on average than girls, not always, but often. Their voices drop a lot more because their load of testosterone is a lot higher. And then remember, adrenarche is over here on the side. So maybe they get their hair, maybe they get their zits, maybe they get their body odor. Eventually they'll get all of it, but not necessarily when the puberty is happening. And the earliest boys might start puberty around 7 or 8. The latest boys, a late bloomer, you don't get called a late bloomer till you're 14. And I take huge issue with that because you tell me that a 14-year-old kid who has no signs of puberty is not socially impacted by that. Those boys tell me they are deeply socially impacted. So if you have a son who is 12 or 13 and looks like nothing is happening, go see the pediatrician, have a conversation, start to understand what's going on. Maybe their testicles are growing and they're in puberty and they're going to be relieved. And maybe they're not, and they need to see an endocrinologist and understand a little bit about what's going on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
A lot of parents have concerns about their children's height, especially if the parents are shorter. They always worry.
Yes.
Tell us, how do you work up a patient? When do you work up a patient? And when do you reassure them that, you know, your child's going to be 5'6", 5'10", whatever the height is? How do you predict it?
Yeah.
And when do you know that you need to add growth hormone or refer them to an endocrinologist?
So in many of the books I've written, because this is such a common question, I have something called the mid-parental height equation. So this is the math you can do to estimate how tall your kid is going to be. And I'll do the equation quickly here, but there's also, we've got it on our website, lessawkward.com, and you can ask our bot and it can do the math for you, although bots aren't great at math. But here's the mid-parental height equation. Okay, so first of all, it has to be the genetic parents, right? This is important. So you have to have this knowledge if you're not the genetic parent. You take the genetic mother's, for a boy, the genetic mother's height, and you add 5 inches. because presumably her male height would have been 5 inches taller just given that male growth spurt, okay? And then you add it to the genetic father's height, and then you divide by 2. And that gives you an average number, and then it's plus or minus 2 inches on either side. The girl math is the opposite. Mom's height plus dad's height minus 5 divided by 2, plus or minus 2 inches. So that's the back of the napkin math that everyone wants to know. But really, you look at their growth charts and you see, where has this kid been growing and trending their whole life? Have things changed? Have they always been the tallest kid in the class? Have they not? Have they fallen off the growth chart? Did they just get a diagnosis with something that can cause slow growth, celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease? Are they facing a cancer diagnosis and they're taking drugs that slow their growth? Do they have asthma? And do they have limited oxygen intake, which can change your growth? Are they on steroids? I mean, there are hundreds of reasons why the math doesn't always work. So that's the conversation with the primary care provider. I will now share my beef. We as a society prize height in a ridiculous way. I don't understand it. I don't understand the pressure that we put, especially on boys.
Yes.
It makes no sense. And so even though I can tell 2 shorter parents, based on the growth charts, it looks like he's going to be about 5'6". Those parents may burst into tears and say, but 5'6"? My kid is at a serious disadvantage at 5'6". And the truth is that while medically that's not true, socially, I understand where they come from because we live in a heightist society. It's terrible. The only height limit that we use in pediatrics that truly puts you in a different category is 4'11". For people who are shorter than 4'11", the gas pedal is not reachable. Upper cabinets are not easily reachable. Like, you're really at a true height disadvantage. But a 5'6" male who wants to be put on growth hormone and they're genetically predispositioned to 5'6", that is a hard conversation. And it does not belong with the primary care doctor. That belongs with an endocrinologist who specializes in growth. I mean, here's how I want you to think about it. Growth hormone tells every single multiplying cell inside the body to grow. So you've got one errant cancer cell in there. And by the way, we all have cancer cells. We are just keeping them at bay. But now you feed them with the strongest fertilizer possible. This is not benign.
Right.
It's not benign.
It's not just this something that you should just do because you want your child to be tall.
And this is why it's a conversation.
I have a question because I've learned so much from Dr. A about PCOS, and it's an onset of puberty with girls, and they get insulin resistance and all of these things. But is there a similar thing that happens to boys? Because when you talk about they get this testosterone, I have seen some boys that, you're right, they get cut and they can eat everything. But then you see another boy whose brother is eating the same thing and he can't, and he's working out. I mean, is there something that's happening?
It's a really interesting question. I don't know that it's been studied.
I mean, you're born with insulin resistance. Do you know what I'm saying? And some children are prone to it. Diet makes a huge difference. When I used to work at California Hospital, you guys, and I would go and deliver, I swear to God, I used to tell my husband, come sit on the bench outside of this hospital. These little boys would show up around 8, 7, 8, 9. They had breast development, full breast. Yeah. They were overweight. It has to be diet. It has to be poor nutrition. All of it makes a difference.
And the breast development is really interesting. It deserves mention for a second because there's breast development and there's what looks like breast development. So sometimes it's fatty tissue that is sitting where the breasts are, but often it's actually real breast development. And it's because the more fat you have in your body, the more peripheral fat conversion you have, where cousins of estrogen get flipped into actual estrogen. And everyone is born with breast tissue, potential breast tissue. And in these boys, talk about issues that really challenge boys growing up. The first one is height. The second one is breast growth. 50% of them have breast growth.
50%.
50%. At some point, they either have buds or they have full breast growth. And a lot of what's driving it is extra, what we call peripheral fat, that's making their estrogen levels higher. Now, here's what's fascinating about this group. The group that carry a lot of extra weight have so much extra estrogen that it offsets their testosterone. Think of them like a seesaw. So those boys are going into puberty later because their testosterone has to overcome the impact of the estrogen. They really do offset each other. So if you look at the trends of when boys are going to puberty, carrying some extra weight, they're still going in early, but carrying a lot of extra weight, they are actually going in later.
So if your little boy has breasts, the solution is he needs to lose weight.
Now you've hit the rawest nerve in pediatrics, because that may be the case, but actually a lot of kids will grow through their weight. They'll just stretch out and they'll redistribute their weight and they'll reutilize their weight. The other thing is what we're feeding our children, and there is no blame being placed on parents here. This is blame being placed on the food, for me, in the food industry. What we are feeding our children is driving the epidemic of obesity and insulin resistance, right? It is calorie dense, nutrition poor, cheap grab and go foods that do not grow a healthy body. So when people say like counting calories or this, that, and the other, it's about quality of what you're putting into the body, and it's extraordinarily expensive to buy quality food.
We talk about this all the time.
It is just not a fair fight. It is not a fair fight. And you look at what, there's a massive number of kids who get 2 meals a day at school because they have so little in the way of resources at home. They're eating breakfast and lunch at school. Now you look at what school is serving them.
It's incredibly disgusting.
Yeah,
it
it's
just makes
not
you
right.
want to,
When ketchup is a vegetable, it's not right. So to me, we have a lot of soul searching to do as a society, and we owe it to the kids around us to give them higher quality nutrition. I don't know who's going to start this. I think Michelle Obama really tried, but it didn't pick up the way it should have.
And when we talk about teenagers, we talk about angst, we talk about, anxiety, depression. So, and I know you get this question, and I get it, and everybody I know wants to know it. How much social media is too much? When do you give your child a phone? What do you recommend?
The older you are, the more mature your brain is, the less impact it is in the long run. Delay, right? By the way, screens are an incredible tool, resource, and medicine. If you ever have a crying kid on a plane, right? What fixes the crying kid on the plane? What's the best medicine you can give them? Your phone, right?
Yeah.
So let's acknowledge they're really good at certain things. The problem with the advice that's come out is that there are 4 million kids born every year. The average age of first cell phone in this country is 10, where you call it yours. Kids have access to devices way before that. But let's start with 10. So between 10 and 18, right? Those are kids between 10 and graduating high school. That's 9 years worth of kids times 4 million kids a year. We got 36 million kids who have phones or access to phones. And we can't take them away. We can't say, oh, these are bad. Here, let me just put it back and I'm going to put the genie back in the bottle. No, these devices are part of their lives. They're part of their social lives. When you look at certain subpopulations, they are life-saving. Look at LGBTQ plus populations. These are social media apps are life-saving for these kids. So there's a huge swath for whom we have not empowered the parents in a way that makes them feel seen and acknowledged, right? Like all of us are walking around. I have a 19 and a 21-year-old, and I'm still sitting here going, oh, I gave them phones too soon. Oh, okay. How about we talk about modulating our use? How about we talk about educating our kids about when use feels good and when use doesn't? So my long answer is delay as long as you can. Acknowledge that you can start when you need to start and when they need to start. You don't have to give them a smartphone. You can give them a dumb phone. You can give them something that looks like a smartphone that only has a phone and limited text on it, and that's not a computer. You can opt out of social media with them for a few years. It's not all or none, right? And when they get old enough, what I did with my kids, and this was one of the better I've messed up parenting so many ways, but one of the better parenting moves I made was, I just want to check in with you about what goes on these sites, because I'm clueless. So once a week, I'm going to ask you 2 things. I'm going to ask you to show me your screen time, and I'm going to ask you to just open up Snapchat or TikTok Just show me what people do. I'm curious. Get curious. And when you do that, first of all, they know you're interested in their life and they'll show you. They won't always show you everything and they don't have to, but they'll show you. And second of all, they become aware of their screen time. So I had my kids set their own screen time limits. They can still bypass it, right? Mm-hmm. But they're less likely to. They're less likely to because they set the limit. And if they bypass it, they're overcoming their limit. It's a really interesting strategy. It doesn't work till they're about 15 or 16.
My husband used to put parental control and my second daughter would hack the computer.
Of course.
I mean, in 2 seconds. And she would come to me, she said, I hacked it. Because she felt guilty, she would tell me.
Of course.
But in 2 seconds, she would take it off. And I don't know if you believe in that, and this is an argument I always have with my husband. Children need to be bored. Because when they're bored, they actually start becoming more creative.
Yes, I totally believe that. Okay. So I have a question. It feels like in the last 5 to 10 years, so many more kids in middle school and high school are saying that they're trans, that they're bisexual, that they are fluid. Is that because we're talking about it more in your expertise? What do you think?
So you're asking a humongous question, which is really important. And not that I'm going to just punt it and say, read my book, but there's a lot of detailed information in the last 2 chapters of the book that I just put out called This Is So Awkward, one about sexual orientation and one about gender identity, which are totally different, by the way, which is why they're different chapters. So sexual orientation is who you love, and gender identity is how you see yourself. I mean, that's sort of the simplest way of putting it. And yes, depending upon your gender identity, your sexual orientation is determined, right? But people conflate them because we put all these initials together, LGBTQ+, but they're really separate. And the question you're asking about is one about gender. And I think it boils down to this new conversation we're having in the world where our kids, right, the Gen Z and Gen Alphas are under 12, they don't feel a need to hold tight to the same pronoun norms that we do. I had the head of the gender clinic from Children's Hospital on my podcast. He's amazing. He's a trans man, and he talked about what parents should do when their kids come home and say, I want to change my pronoun. And his advice is this: you listen, you get curious, and then it's a nothing burger. You don't rush to medical care. You're not pumping them with hormones. You're not rushing to surgery, right? Some number of them, it's going to stick. A huge number of them, it's something they want to try on. It's something that is very of the moment right now. And it's parents' oversensitivity to it and their determination to be supportive of their kids and then to rush into some sort of therapeutic environment that has, I think, caused a lot of that tension. Kids over the age of 18 have the right to make their own medical choices. It's this 15 to 18 zone where it's gone state by state and different states have different rules around it. And it's really complicated because there are some kids who are, their mental health is devastated by the fact that they have grown up in a body that doesn't feel right for them. And those kids need to be seen and acknowledged. And there has to be a path, some path for those kids. There are other kids who they're gender curious, they're gender fluid. They're now, their whole world is surrounded by very supportive people. This is so highly specialized. This requires people who are trained and thoughtful. And we got to get government out of this. This is medical care. This is about understanding a kid, having a team approach, having a social worker, having a psychiatrist, having a pediatrician. So this is not about the adults in the room, it's about the kid.
And it isn't about you. I love what you said.
It's not about you.
That it's about, hey, listen, be curious, and then let them alone.
That's right.
Let them explore.
Really, the biggest issue that trans kids face that they talk about openly is just the mental health impact of feeling like, if you identify as male and you're getting periods, this is complicated stuff, right? This is complicated. So if you're truly living in the wrong body, you know, when parents feel like, oh, every kid in my kid's 4th grade class says they're bi. Okay, so I want to pause on that. Those kids are 10 and 11 years old. And most of them, almost all of them, have never kissed a person, held hands with a person, and yet they're defining their sexual orientation. Like, take a breath, parents.
Take a break. I think that's the best advice I've heard is literally, because I hear this all the time from parents who are, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Right.
And take a breath.
I have patients, they come with their parents, usually their mom, and a lot of them actually have PCOS or they have hormone imbalance, they have elevation of the testosterone, so it can affect their sexuality, their sex drive. And I had a mom once, she told me, well, you need to fix her hormones because I know my daughter is going to marry a guy and her attraction to this girl right now is not normal. And I brought her here and you need to fix her hormones because once you fix her hormones, she'll be all good. And I was just sitting there going, oh my God. And this girl is like 23 years old.
Yeah.
Right.
And it is so hard to have these conversations.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is years ago, but I really let that mom have it.
Good.
You
Thank
know,
you.
Oh, yeah. And I was like, this is so ignorant. And you should just love your daughter. It doesn't matter who she loves.
Right.
But majority of the time, the problem are the parents, not the children.
That's what we're saying.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's not about the child. It's about how you feel about that.
That's right.
So back to boys and girls in this subject, porn. Growing up, you know, my boyfriend had magazines, if that was going to be it. Now, you know, these kids have access to so much. And I've had the conversation with my boys, which is like, look, there's pornography and that isn't real. But I think that these teenagers, when they first started having sex, they think that that's how it's supposed to look. And that's their example. What is your advice to parents dealing with both boys and girls?
Can you imagine having had a movie play for you before you ever had sex, telling you how it's going to go, what your body's supposed to look like, what their body's supposed to look like, right? And then you layer on what happens in a lot of free porn, which is the violence and the aggression and the misogyny and all that. Like, so the average age of first porn viewing in this country, do you know what it is?
Oh my God.
13?
Yeah, 12.
I was going to say 12.
12.
Don't tell me it's 12.
Average age for first. And it's actually,
that's shocking.
We shouldn't say viewing, we should say exposure.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these kids who are carrying around their phones, they're
accidentally.
It's accidental.
Yep.
These
Yep.
pornographers know they want these young audiences. They want free porn to go to young eyeballs so that eventually some will convert to paying customers. So they're not dumb, right? Also, remember, the tween and teen brain is only half baked, right? It's not going to fully mature until they're almost 30. What does that mean? What it means is over the course of their tween and teen years, the part of the brain that's totally mature, that can send and receive messages really, really fast, is the middle part of the brain called the limbic system. The limbic system is the emotional, motivated, risk-reward, feel-good part of the brain. We all have it, but that's what dominates the tween and teen brain and the 20-something brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO, which weighs a consequence, function. Right? Totally. Like if I do this, this will happen. If I do that, that will happen. Oh, I should definitely do that. That is not mature until they're almost 30. It's there, but they can't send and receive messages quickly. So you've got this perfect storm, a limbic system that dominates the brain, all of these devices that have access, and all of these pornographers who are uploading. And by the way, I've said it isn't real for so long, but actually there's now all of this organic content that people upload their own like user-generated porn. So sometimes kids will come back and go, well, it actually is real. And that's its own pathology, right? It's its own complication. But I'm so glad you've had the conversation, and I hope you have it 100 times more, because they need to hear it often. They need to know that's not sex education. They need to know that mutual respect and love and fun is part of having sex, that it's not like what is portrayed in especially free porn is not the sex you want your kids to have. Mm-hmm. It's just not. And there is behind a paywall porn that is sometimes feminist and, you know, et cetera, but not what they're seeing
Not
one
what
click
they're
away.
saying. They're not
Not
looking
what
for
they're
the
saying.
feminist
Yeah.
porn.
Like their limbic system is firing like crazy. It's sexual, it's sexy, it's enticing. They can't help but want to watch it. So then they carry around this cloak of shame that's associated with their sexual development. It's so sad.
It's
So
so
it's
sad.
just-
That's why
yeah.
it's so good that you talk to
Yeah.
them because
so good.
I was real. I did that one right.
You did
that
great.
one was amazing.
that's amazing.
And by the way,
because-
guys, girls, doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
doesn't
just
matter.
tell them.
Doesn't matter.
And then stress. We
Yeah.
brought that up. How do we deal with
Yeah.
this? It just seems like this everyday society with these kids. You know, I have one that's about to apply to go to college, one that's in 10th grade. My baby, who's always my funny one, that's always sort of like throws these one-liners out. You know, he did this program this summer where he did a business program, and he said, "Mom, next summer I'm not doing anything. My childhood is fleeting, and I am not enjoying it." And I said, okay,
love
but
that kid.
how do we
Yeah.
get these kids to, you know, it's this, you know, we're helicopter parenting them. We're making sure that they're, you know, doing this and this and this to get them in school these days. You need,
Yeah.
you know, a TED talk. So it's, you know, how does
So
this?
true. So I think it's the perfect place to land the conversation because it brings us full circle. And here's why. In the body, the stress response means that the adrenal glands, those same glands that are in charge of releasing DHEA and DHEAS that make you zitty and make you smell and make you have hair grow all over, those adrenal glands release cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Cortisol is associated with the fight or flight response, right? So you're being threatened, you can get out of there, right? It's associated in positive ways with certain scenarios, like you take a test and you're stressed and your cortisol goes up, you can pull things out of your memory more easily, right? But it's also, when released 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it is associated with a whole host of really unhealthy physiological outcomes. Your cardiovascular system is more challenged. Your musculature is more challenged. Like, your body does not like having cortisol. Your immune system turns down in response to cortisol all the time. And now what we know is that higher levels of cortisol consistently are associated with earlier puberty. So who has higher levels of cortisol? Kids who are stressed out about going to college, right? Mm-hmm. For sure. Kids who are overachievers, for sure. Kids who see violence, kids who live through addiction, kids who have economic instability, kids who are living in a world of climate change and war and political infighting. There isn't a kid who isn't exposed to chronic stressors. So it brings us full circle because it looks like one of the main reasons why kids are entering puberty earlier than ever before is chronic stress.
And what do we do?
Well, if you believe that narrative that I just gave you, and there's a lot of science to back it up, then back the hell off as a parent. Just put your phone down, be present, live in the moment, laugh with your kid, but let's stop trying to make little adults. They're not little adults. They're kids. And let's stop trying to pre-professionalize them in every way. They're not little professional athletes. They're not little professional computer scientists or business people. They're people. And for the kids who grow up with ACEs, which are these adverse circumstances like violence and drug use and economic instabilities, we got to help those kids. Yeah. We have to lift each other up. If you look at the percentage of kids growing up in poverty in this country, it is unacceptable. Talk about chronic stress, right?
Oh, my heart. You can't even imagine what these children go through. The most important gift you can give to your children is the gift of happiness.
That's right.
So let them be. I always say, let them. I mean, listen, I have 2 girls at Stanford, but I was never a tiger mom.
Yeah.
I think they got to Stanford because they saw how I worked.
That's right.
Do you know what I'm saying? I never went home, even like in the past few years, screaming at them, where's your homework? I've never checked their homework, you know? And you learn to just let go. And sometimes, and I learned this from Elizabeth English and from Lisa D'Amour, that when you let these children be, they actually do better.
Okay, top 5 tips. So top 5 tips to parents listening to this on how to speak to your child about puberty.
Okay.
The school's
5.
doing it for you, but go ahead.
5. Here we go. Number 1, leave the judgment at the door. Like any feelings you have don't matter. Check them at the door. Number 2, it's not your puberty. You went through puberty. When they want to talk about it, they want to talk about their puberty. So don't make it about the stories of your life unless they're funny, and then you can tell your story. Number 3, engage as much as you can. Talk to them. Ask them questions that are not yes, no questions. But number 4, when they do shut the door and need the break, give them the break because they will come back to you. And then the 5th, and this is my favorite piece of advice, is we always tell kids to find their trusted adults. I think adults need trusted adults. I think adults need a community to go to say when they're worried, or to query their friends about how did you handle this? And there should be no stigma or shame around it. It should just be, I need my friend to help me because it's not appropriate for me to go to my kid to get this help, but I can definitely go to my best friend or my sibling or my parent.
You are so incredible, and thank you so much. This has been
You're
so
amazing.
enlightening.
Thank you. You
So
guys
much
are
fun.
too. I love what you're doing.
Thanks so much for joining us today on SheMD.
If you want to own your own health, a good place to start is by following us on social media at SheMD Podcast and by subscribing to our show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
For takeaways from today's episode, visit our website, shemdpodcast.com. We'll see you next time on SheMD. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for a physician's medical advice. You should regularly consult your medical provider in matters relating to your own health. Even though we share our honest beliefs on SheMD, some of the products and services we discuss may involve sponsorships or paid advertising.